All right, now that one tank is emptied and the other is filled, let's get back to it.
So you don't see this as any kind of self-destructive urge?
That has actually never been presented to me, even being in therapy. Like I have a death wish or something.
That's what I'm asking.
I've never been suicidal, and I've been
However,
pretty, bummed out at different stages of life. So I don't think so. I would say no. And in fact, just like being a lifeguard, which by the way I also was, if you have to go into the water to do a rescue, it's because you screwed up, not because you're a good lifeguard.
I understand.
And that's because you see the kid who's going to start struggling. You say, hey,
I understand. Yep.
come
Yeah,
to the
I get
shallow
it.
end
Yep. Yep.
before he gets too deep and literally in over his head.
Yeah.
Same thing with protection. If I'm your bodyguard and I have to take you from the room that you're in now down to the car, but there's people waiting outside, you're staying in the house. I think I learned this back in college. I forget. I think it's like 97 out of 100 political scientists say that the president of the United States is the most powerful, currently still a man, but we're pretty close, the most powerful man in the world. 3 of those 100 say that it is the head of his security detail, because that is the one person, man and sometimes a woman, who can tell him no. And he has no choice in the matter. One such example was after 9/11, George W. Bush went to throw out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium when things became, unlocked and back to pseudo level of normalcy. He was supposed to wear a Yankees jersey to do that. But his staff saw that the ballistic vest that he was wearing was showing through the jersey. And they were afraid that, being able to see that he was wearing a vest would make him look weak.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, well, the Secret Service swept the whole place. They swept everybody coming in. We'll take the vest off. And the special agent in charge of that detail that year was a man named Carl Truscott, who said, no, you won't. That stays on. I don't care about the Yankees jersey. I don't care if he goes out there in his underwear, but he's wearing a vest. And that's how he wore the bomber jacket that he actually wore to throw out the first pitch.
Okay.
Another one, actually also at 9/11, Dick Cheney was in a meeting when all that happened. And he was quoted as saying, I don't really remember much. 2 large men in dark suits came in, picked me up out of my chair, and my feet touched the ground twice between that chair and the limo. He was carried out of the office. He was carried out of the meeting, carried to the car, and evacuated.
Well, it must have been curious to you then, January 6th, more recently, when Mike Pence in the garage refused to get in the limo.
The only reason that happened, I can't elaborate too deeply.
Because of classified information and whatnot?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But once we moved him away from the chamber and out of more public hallways, they never would have found him. They never would
Now,
have got to him.
talk about your involvement.
Unfortunately, by that point, I had already moved to L.A.
Okay.
I have some friends that were just recently given commendations for responding to the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
They were from the essentially the airport police, the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority.
Mm-hmm.
They have Reagan Airport and Dulles Airport, and they knew nothing was happening at the airport areas. So, being extra bodies, their command staff said, "Get to the Capitol, do it in uniform," and in fact, I think they were actually dropped off because they didn't want anything to happen to the cars. Another on-duty person that had to go back to the airport dropped them off, and then they went on foot and helped kick ass.
Mm-hmm.
They're also SWAT guys, tactical guys.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
there was that. They were just recently a group photo taken in the rotunda of the Capitol with Capitol police officers they worked with and other agencies and so on.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I would have loved to have been there.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably not be able to own a house because of some sort of lawsuit, but yeah, I was very rammy that day in L.A.
I bet. Wanting to
Yeah,
be back on the East
that was
Coast.
hard. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
sure. So, your whole career, 21 years in the Secret Service. What were the hardest parts of that for you?
Again, some of the politics.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing people on the president's detail that are not qualified to be on the president's detail, performing jobs I was overqualified to do
For example?
because I wasn't some biking. I remember when I was still in San Francisco, I had some other job for the visit, but George W. was coming to the Napa Valley, and one of the things he was doing was a bike ride through a trail in a state park. The two agents that the office assigned to it were good guys and capable of riding a mountain bike through that course. The president's detail, that guy wasn't. And he did what's called fall out, which means he wasn't able to complete the course with the president.
Mm.
But he's the one that was supposed to be riding this course all week, leading up to it, getting to know every aspect of the course and how to get him out if there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So the president passed him.
Mm-hmm.
And our guys, our field office guys had to, keep up and continue to lead him. And I mean, it's one single trail. It's not hard. The president knows where he's going to go. So the president's detail guy fell out. When he got sent back home at the end of when he left to go back to DC at the end of the visit, he was kicked off the detail because you don't do that. Mm-hmm. Just other people, competence. They try to provide an appearance of a diverse work environment, and they get that, but they don't have a competent work environment because there's people who are overweight, doing certain things, or just out of shape. That
in order to be politically correct. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
In order to be politically correct, you have incompetent people doing stuff they should not.
And don't get me wrong, some of my best friends are women, black agents from other nationalities, some of the best people I've ever worked with. But they too probably aren't the most political.
Mm-hmm.
And
so I would imagine, that watching the political machinations throughout your career must have been a real challenge for you. I mean, what perspective can you give us about the, I don't want to say rich and famous, but let's say the famous and powerful in general terms, not mentioning names of any kind, but what did you learn about people, about politics, about people in power
I think for the most
throughout your
part,
career? Yeah.
most of them are pretty much just like us. And I can mention names. George W. is one of the guys, and we knew that, because
Right.
one of the things he had to kind of fight off with it was his, kind of wild days in college. Bill and Hillary are probably two of the brightest people you could possibly ever meet. Much more down to earth than what they're credited for, much nicer than what Hillary's credited for. Barack is one of the most down to earth people you could ever meet. Cheney has been around the block.
Were you disenchanted at any point with particular people in power? And if so, how and why?
Republican senators that are gay and are not supportive of the gay community. Republican congressmen that were the same way, that are actually, I can tell you this one because it's common knowledge now. Aaron Schock from, I think, Wisconsin was this young, good-looking, six-pack abs congressman from Wisconsin who everybody said, oh, he's got to be gay because straight guys don't look like that. Mm-hmm. No, I'm straight. Voted against pro-gay legislation. Is seen at Coachella after he's kicked out of office for various reasons, alluding that perhaps he was actually gay. Financial disclosure stuff. Gets kicked out of office and is seen later kissing a guy at Coachella, both of whom were shirtless, partying it up at the outdoor festival in Palm Springs, outside of Palm Springs. So, yeah, I mean, that's disappointing. There's somebody who could have helped our community, even if it's just being one more voice.
Well, now let me ask you this. Since we're there,
yeah,
how has being gay yourself affected your decisions throughout your career?
I was never open about it because I knew not to be. I was outed in San Francisco by a girl that was, I don't want to say just secretary, but she was in what's called the administrative staff. She was not an agent. She was not a gun-carrying personnel. She was a secretary. And she told me and another gay agent that she wouldn't say anything. And the very next day, I've got people coming up to me telling me she's going around saying this. And I was one of the golden boys up till that point. I was pretty liked by management. And once that came about, I didn't know that I had to start being more political than what I already was.
What does that mean?
When there was something that I disagreed, ass kissing.
Okay.
Flat out. Because when there was something that I disagreed with, I wasn't afraid to say it. Mm-hmm. And now I'm, burning bridges and pissing in Cheerios or whatever you want to call it because of speaking the truth. Mm-hmm. And so
did you find yourself, let me just ask you this. Did you find yourself being a little paranoid? Did you find it triggered depression of any kind?
I didn't know that yet, but it would. It wouldn't be until I was investigated for the first of 3 times for being gay. I was on Hillary's detail, and a guy comes to me in the hotel lobby, another agent. He's pretty much crying. He was in tears. He was shaking. And this guy is not known for being in tears or shaking. You know, shaved head, tats all over the place, you know, athletic, you know, jock type of build, tough guy look. Mm-hmm. And he was shaken and teary-eyed. And another agent joined him, and sat me down at breakfast and said, look, this particular supervisor has it out for you. He's going around asking if we know whether or not you're gay. That is very illegal in the federal government. And I don't know how that ended, but it did. There were other things like that where, because of that, I would lock horns with management. I was put on 6 weeks of midnights, and nobody could tell me why. It got to a point where I said, if I'm on after week number 6, I said to one of the bigger bosses, I said, if I'm on for week number 7, you should know that I've got more sick leave than you have night shifts. And my attorneys are better than yours. He said, no, we put you on that because you were behind in some paperwork, which I was able to prove was done. Mm-hmm. I had electronic copies on my computer that are another administrative person who was literally a little crazy. She also, back then, was already in some sort of therapy for something. And she lost stuff all the time.
Okay.
And so, you know, she lost I don't know how many weeks, but a lot of weeks of timesheets that we have to figure out, you know, what we did, and right. We have to tell the government, you know, where we've been and so on. And so this bigger boss said, we put you on midnight so you get caught up on your paperwork. And his nickname was Coach. I said, Coach, I've always had my paperwork. Nobody asked for it. And that same supervisor that initiated the gay investigation, who was my immediate supervisor, told me that's not why I was on midnights. Mm-hmm. That it was just because they kept picking me. Now, which is it? And nobody knew what to say. Miraculously, I had a couple days off before going back on to day shift. Mm-hmm. I would be investigated 2 more times. One at the beginning of the Trump administration and one at the end.
Hey gang, if you haven't figured out by now, we're doing a series. So, we're going to take a break, but then come right back with the next episode.